NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state.
Hey, sports fans, Todd McGee here. Whether you're tailgating in Chapel Hill or Raleigh, catching a Panthers or Hornets game in Charlotte, or heading to Durham for a Bulls game, there's a smarter way to travel. NC by train. Skip traffic and parking problems. Ride in comfort with free Wi-Fi, wide seats, and even snacks on board. Trains run daily to major sports cities across North Carolina with student discounts, bike access, and great group deals. NC by Train makes your game day travel easy and affordable. Visit ncbytrain.org to plan your next sports trip. That's ncbytrain.org. We'll see you on board. NC by Train. Go Connect.
The North Carolina Sports Network presents This Was Then. Exploring North Carolina's rich sports history with Tim Peeler and Todd McGee. Presented by NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state. Episode 3. The Football Charlotte Hornets. A look back at North Carolina's first professional football team with President and General Manager Upton Bell.
So hello and welcome to another episode of This Was Then with yours truly, Todd McGee and Tim Peeler. We are very excited tonight to kick off a series of episodes looking back at one of the more unusual and interesting episodes of North Carolina sports history. More than 2 decades before the Carolina Panthers brought the National Football League to the bold North State, North Carolina's first foray into major professional football occurred in 1974, when the struggling New York Stars of the new World Football League relocated to Charlotte midway through the season. Over the next few weeks and months, we're going to have a series of interviews with former players for the Hornets. We want to extend a special thanks to Richie Franklin, who's doing a great job of keeping the memory of the WFL alive. If you want to learn more about the Charlotte Hornets, visit Richie's website at www.charlottehornetswfl.com. He's got stats, photos, video, and audio clips, and much, much more. Richie also helped arrange all the interviews with the former players, and tonight we'll kick off the episodes with a visit with Upton Bell, the man responsible for bringing major pro football to North Carolina in 1974.
I'm so excited to talk to our guest tonight because he goes back to the very roots of football itself. His grandfather coached with Walter Camp. His dad created the Philadelphia Eagles. He also once merged the Eagles with the Pittsburgh Steelers during World War II to create the Phil Pitt Steagles, which is a great little tidbit in the history of professional football. His dad was the commissioner of the NFL. He was born and raised in football. But he also ran track. He played basketball, went to LaSalle. When Weeb Ewbank was the coach of the Baltimore Colts, he used to have the people at his tryouts, and there were hundreds of them. He would cull them out by saying, anybody here who can't outrun our assistant ticket manager can go ahead and leave. And most of them lost. So it made his job a lot easier. He was once the youngest general manager in the NFL at the Boston Patriots. And then we just want to talk to you about one specific question I have, and we can spend the entire time tonight talking about that. But why would you bring a professional football team from the largest city in the country to Charlotte, North Carolina in 1975 when it was not the banking center that it is today? So welcome tonight, our guest, Upton Bell. Mr. Bell, thank you.
Thank you. Well, let me go back to the very beginning. By the way, Bert Bell invented the pro football draft. If he didn't do that, you wouldn't even be watching the NFL today, and that crazy owner that you have now owning the Carolina Panthers. Oh, my God, good luck on that. But the reason is, and I'll take you all the way back, and you probably don't know this history. In 1965, as the assistant personnel director of the Baltimore Colts, we had decided to scout the Continental Football League, which was another professional league with a lot of players that didn't quite make the NFL, but were, had an opportunity to do it. So at that time, I ended up, two things in my life I was looking at. One, I wanted to be an owner of a football team one day like my father was. And two, I wanted to scout and find players that maybe were ignored or, didn't get a second chance. So there was a player called Winston Mapp, M-A-P. You guys probably never heard of him, from the Charlotte Vikings, professional football team in the Continental League. It only lasted in Charlotte 1 year and then went to other places. And he was an ex-player that played for the Cowboys just briefly the year before. So when I came to Charlotte, the first thing that I saw is this is really fertile ground for a professional football team. You've got Atlanta that's too far down the road. You've got Washington, and then you've got all of this universe in between. And I looked at Charlotte, which was beginning to be kind of a banking center, and said, you know what, someday, if the situation is right, I'm coming back to Charlotte. And I fulfilled my dream in one way to come back and found the team. Now, the reason you asked the question, why would you move in the middle of the season from New York, the biggest market in all of football or in all of sports, and bring it to Charlotte? The reason was the team was going broke. The owner, Bob Smertz, who also owned the Celtics, was going broke. They couldn't pay their bills. They're playing at Randall's Island, and they were going nowhere. And interestingly enough, David Merrick, who was a very, very big producer of major shows on Broadway, they thought that Howard Baldwin had found a guy to buy them, but he backed out in the last minute. So I came in. Howard Baldwin, who had founded other teams in other leagues like the Hartford Whalers, sent me down. I made a deal with Bob Smertz, and my deal was he'd give me a little bit of cash, and I would take it to North Carolina, put together an ownership group. And it's funny, the next day, they had a big announcement that they were leaving New York. And I remember Howard Cosell getting up and saying, Upton Bell, you know better than this. What are you taking this team out of the greatest city in the world, and why are you taking it to Charlotte? I said, for the simple reason, Howard, they can't pay their goddamn bills. And I shut him up. So there we were. I took Babe Perilli, who was the coach. We got on a plane. We flew to Charlotte. We set up a ticket sale in a hotel. I think it was a Holiday Inn right in Charlotte. And we set up the ticket purchase thing for 2 days. In 2 days, the game was sold out. And I said, I knew I picked the right place. So that's how we ended up coming there. And that's why it's ironic. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I told Dan Rooney when the league went down, I called him, who was head of the expansion committee for the Steelers. I called him, I said, Dan, I've been here for 2 years. I said, this is the place that you need to put an expansion franchise in. This is it. I've tested it out for you. And of course, unfortunately, I didn't end up being the owner. Jerry Richardson did, who ironically was the backup receiver to Raymond Berry at the Baltimore Colts the year they won the championship. And he never came back. He took his money and invested in the Hardee's restaurants, and that's where he made his fortune. So anyway, opening game, sellout. People from all over. Will McDonough, the Boston Globe, came down. It was covered from everywhere. In the meantime, that week, I quickly did two things. I met with the most powerful person in Charlotte, and maybe one of the most powerful in the South, John Belk, who was the mayor, who owned Belk Department Stores. If you didn't get him on your side, you were dead meat. I met with him, number one. And he did say to me, he said, Upton, he said, I'm loving them Washington Redskins. He said, I've always been a Redskin fan. He said, but we're going to give you guys a chance. The second person I went to see, the largest Cadillac agency in North Carolina and in Charlotte, Arnold Palmer Cadillac. I went in, Gar Lowe, who was running it, set up a meeting with Arnold Palmer and myself. He loved pro football. It's from outside of Pittsburgh. He said, I'll give you $5,000. Now, remember, 74, $5,000 to invest in a team that had done nothing was a lot of money. He said, the only thing that I want to make sure of is that I don't want any television cameras on me. I want to take my salesmen to the games. I want to drink my beers with them, and I don't want any publicity. And I said to myself, fine, whatever you want. So we lost that opening game against the Memphis Southmen, who a year later are going to have Zonka kick in Warfield. People loved it. They went crazy. We had a big after party. Palmer comes to the after party. The mayor comes. All of Charlotte society shows up for this big event that we had afterwards. And I said, you know what? We're off and running. And of course, the rest of the story is a little bit downhill.
All right, I do have a question. Could you even get Rolling Rock in Charlotte in 1974 to give to Arnold Palmer, the proudest resident of Latrobe, Pennsylvania there's ever been, and the finest beer of Pennsylvania? I don't know
Didn't
that you
get
could
the
get it.
Rolling Rock, but we didn't get the Rolling Rock, but we got the Rolling Stone, and that was Arnold Palmer. And the minute people heard that he was in, we began to get some other investors. Now, there were other local people involved. So a friend of mine who ran the Boston Redevelopment Authority, a guy by the name of Bob Kenny, he went to school with Luther Hodges, who was the youngest president of the North Carolina National Bank. Also with him was Hugh McCall, who was a big, and of course went on to make a fortune, and now that they had the big merger. But Hugh McCall was a big football fan. Luther, not so much. But sitting down with him, he said, we'll get the bank behind you. I'm probably the only person, maybe, in football history that the North Carolina National Bank gave me an office free of charge, gave me a parking spot, gave us all sorts of things to help us in their building, North Carolina National Bank building. They also set me up with an attorney by the name of Dick Thigpen, who I know is still alive there, who eventually he ended up being the attorney for the Carolina Panthers, and his son then took off after him. So a lot of things were coming down and were looking good for a while.
I know that you made some good friends with lots of people in Charlotte, including one of my great good friends from a long time being around golf in the state of North Carolina, Bill Hensley, who I think was the
he was the guy. Is he still alive?
he passed away a couple of years ago
Oh my
down in
God.
Charlotte.
I called Hensley. We're going back a little bit. You know what? The guy walks on water. Sweetest human being you want to meet.
Absolutely.
I called Hensley, who was head of the Chamber of Commerce. Or no, he was working in the Chamber of Commerce because Don Bryant was the head. I called him. I said, we're coming down. We're setting up at the Holiday Inn to sell tickets. He said, I'll be there. And he said, I will smooth everything over for you guys to get you going. And he was. The minute we got off the plane, held a press conference there. There was Bill Hensley. I'm telling you, a sweetheart of a man. And that's one of the things that I will say now. And again, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. The thing that I loved about Charlotte, and I still in my heart today think about them, the Bill Hensley, the Don Bryants, the Arnold Palmers, all of the people in that town. Is Slug Claiborne still alive? Slug Claiborne's steak restaurants?
I don't know that he is, but I don't know a lot of his history.
It was the who's who of nice people. and we're willing to go through all the ups and downs of particularly that first year with the World Football League.
Hey, y'all, David Glenn here from the North Carolina Sports Network. When I'm in Wrightsville Beach, my go-to hangout is Jimmy's, the best local bar for sports fans, live music, cold drinks, and coastal vibes. No matter your favorite team, Jimmy's Bar is the place that sports fans from all across the Carolinas can call their home away from home. The next time you visit Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach, tell them DG sent you. Need to move to North Carolina, within North Carolina, or away from North Carolina? Whether it's the Triangle, the Triad, or beyond, XL Moving and Storage is the company you can trust. Local, reliable, award-winning, and stress-free, XL's team handles every detail so you don't have to. Get your free quote today at xlms.com. That's EXCELMS.com. And tell them David Glenn sent you.
I want to remind everybody that you tuned into This Was Then with Tim Peeler and Todd McGee on the North Carolina Sports Network. And our guest tonight is Upton Bell. We're talking about the 1974-75 incarnation of the Charlotte Hornets in the World Football League. Now, Upton, when this first started coming up, the team that was associated with you was the Detroit Wheels, who were a team that was not doing well at all in the league, hadn't won a game. They were playing in a high school stadium, not even in Detroit, but in a suburb of Detroit, and they were really struggling. So that was the initial coverage, was that you were going to be possibly bringing a group in.
Listen, I know a stiff when I see one, and in that case, they had offered me the World Football League wanted me in the league for my name, for my father's name, for what it brought to it. I understood that perfectly. And when somebody said to me, "How about the Detroit Wheels?" said, "No way, I will." Those people are dead and gone. But I said I would be interested in the New York Stars because I knew that they had a damn good football team. And Babe Purley I knew as the coach, so I was familiar with them. I wasn't going to take a team that I didn't think could compete. Forget for a while all the money problems, the financial problems. I wanted to bring a team to Charlotte that could compete with the best teams in the league, and that we could do. What I wanted to do then is go around and raise money legitimately to keep the team going in Charlotte, which to a degree we did. And then, of course, I'm getting ahead of myself again. Then we had one of the most infamous men in the history of pro football, Paul Sasso, alias Paul Sassone, the man who tried to commit suicide off the Verrazano Bridge. Do you guys know that story?
Just a little bit. I know more now.
Oh my God! But anyway, that was what I was really looking at. To have a solid foundation of a team that people would come to see play, and ironically, the backup quarterback on that team was Gary Danielson, who eventually played very well for the Detroit Lions, and he's still on CBS television today. So there were a lot of people from that team that went on and had great careers, including the whole coaching staff.
Let's set up a little bit about the team that you inherit or that you purchased and were part of. The New York Stars. They played under a bridge on Randall's Island at the old stadium there. About 20,000 people could fit in there. Kind of a dirt field, not a whole lot of facilities. I believe John Sterling, when he called the games there in New York, sat on an orange crate to call the games. Just not a whole lot of facilities, a whole lot of things going on there.
Well, no, they didn't. But I knew the situation. Really, Randall's Island used to be the place where you tried out for the Olympics. It was really a track.
Yes.
Masking as a stadium. But again, I didn't want to bring something to Charlotte. Remember Paul Zimmerman, the great writer for
Yes.
Sports Illustrated, Dr. Z, calling me while I was taking a shower. It's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in Charlotte, our first night there. And he's berating me. He said, "Upton, what the hell are you doing? You took that team." He said, "Do you want an all-Southern league?" I said, I really don't give a damn if it's an all-Southern league or not, as long as it makes money and we get a TV contract, which they did have the first year with a TV network. So when I looked at it, I knew that the image was bad. There were problems in the league, but I figured, it's funny when I was talking this week in an interview that I sent you guys that I did internationally on the early parts of the NFL. The reason that I took a chance on this league is that basically, if you look at the early history of the NFL, which most people don't, because most people don't have an attention span over 5 minutes when it comes to sports, that essentially 20 teams failed in the NFL from 1920, the founding, till Burt Bell founded the draft in 1935. So I looked at our league and I said, okay, there are going to be teams that don't make it. They're going to go through this period of great adjustment and great upheaval. But in the end, if nothing else, I think I can help Charlotte get in to the National Football League. So that was my reasoning in doing this thing. And all of it might have looked crazy in the beginning, but in the end, we're sitting here and talking 30, 40 years later. And you know what I'm saying? My dream came true for Charlotte, just wasn't me.
Upton, if I could get you to do us a favor, could you take your hat off? When you lean forward, all we see is your hat. There you go.
That's great.
That's much better. Okay.
Man, you're a lot better looking than I thought you were.
Are you kidding me?
I wanted to ask you, so
never had a facelift, never had anything done. Work out every day for 2 hours, and I'll be 88 in October.
well, you're looking great. So you kind of led me into a question I wanted to ask you. So all throughout the National Football League, you had the All-American Football Conference in the late 40s come along. Then some of those teams got absorbed into the NFL. The AFL came along in the 60s. Some of those teams get absorbed in the NFL. Was that part of the mix of the appeal of the WFL, that you thought maybe this would be a way to get my NFL team, given that in the years past, successful leagues had seen the best teams go into the National Football League?
I certainly, yes. That if the league had made it, I would have been fine. But I knew realistically that myself, Johnny Bassett, who ended up going to Memphis and had signed Zonka, Kick, and Warfield, I thought that Charlotte, Memphis, Birmingham, maybe, although it was a big college football town, but they had big crowds. I thought there were teams in Southern California. There was a team in Hawaii, Chris Hemmeter, who took over when Jerry Davidson, we threw him out. Came up with a terrific plan. Certainly, you think about that. I mean, I was a son of an owner who saw so many teams fold, including Burt Bell's Eagles almost folded, and that's why during the Second World War that they actually merged together to save their team. So I had seen all the bad things and understood that there would be teams that wouldn't make it. But in the end, if you got 3 or 4 teams, as they did in the old All-America Conference with the Browns and the Colts and the 49ers, and again, when the NFL took in 10 teams from the AFL, I saw that coming because I understood it. I grew up in it. So my biggest thing in the end was I wanted to make sure one way or another that Charlotte ended up with a franchise. And if, all of these years later, 50 years later, I think Ronald Green, who you had to know, used to write for the Charlotte, was the Observer and the Charlotte News. He and Bill Ballinger wrote for the News. Larry Talton was the sports editor, and Richard Sink wrote for them. So we had plenty of coverage there. But I remember Ronald Green called me after I'd come back to Boston when the team didn't make it. He did a long interview with me, and he said, "Anything do you regret any of the things you did?" I said, "No." I said, "The happiest thing I am is for Charlotte. They got the team for the town, and I'm happy for them." And I still feel that way today.
Well, let's go back to the end of the 74 season. Your team actually did well. You qualified for the playoffs, yet you didn't get to play in the playoff game. So tell us how that came about.
Well, a couple of things happened. Number one, the league was beginning to get into financial trouble. And the whole idea of having more playoffs with more teams having to go from one town to another, fly across the country to play. That was one thing. But the other story, which is, I will tell you this, if there's ever a movie to be made about a crazy league and a crazy time, it would be the World Football League. So we're playing the Shreveport Steamers in Shreveport. And I did not go to that game. I had a lot of things I was going to meet with potential buyers and stuff like that. So I stayed home in Charlotte. So at halftime, I get a call from my business manager, Ken Bogdanoff, and he said, Upton, there's a sheriff here outside the door. And he said, it looks like he's from the Dodge commercial. And he said, he's got a warrant here for all of the equipment that he originally was told to take it away so you couldn't play the game. He said, but I've agreed to let you play the game, but as soon as the game is over, we're coming for your equipment. Now, what happened was Bob Smertz didn't pay his bills at Randall Island and didn't pay a cleaning company and owed them $25,000 or $30,000 for cleaning the uniforms. So what happened was when he was sued, they sent an order down there to cease and desist the Hornets wearing the uniforms of the New York Stars. So I said to Kenny, I said, any way to sneak them out after the game? Is there a back door there? Is there a way? And he said, the sheriff has got the back door. He's got the back door blocked. We aren't going anyway. So they took the uniforms. So we had no uniforms to play the next week. Although finally we made an agreement with the sheriff's office and with the owner of that was owed the money for the uniforms that we would settle it later on in the year. And of course, then we did play, but the playoffs were out. The whole idea, because parts of the league had begun to fall apart.
Now, it was a pretty aggressive league. 20 regular season games, is that correct? Played on Wednesday and Thursday nights?
Yes, well, not only that, they had the action point, they had the dicker rod, they changed a lot of the game, and I like the kind of wide open game that we're playing. The action point, you had no choice. When you scored a touchdown, you got 6 points, but you had to go for the 2 points. You couldn't kick it; you had to run it. And they brought a lot of different things and wide open things to the game. But I got to tell you this story. In the second year, we're due to play one of the best teams in the league, the Florida Blazers. They were coached by Jack Pardee, who later on got the head coaching job with the Washington Redskins. And Robbie Loud owned them. Robbie Loud used to work for me here at the Patriots. And he went down, he wanted to be an owner in his life too, but he got into all sorts of trouble with drugs and everything else like that. And they were about to take the team away from him. So I get a call from court, from a judge, and he said, Mr. Bell, I'm sitting here with Coach Pardee and some of the team, and he said, they want to go up and play you in Charlotte. And by the way, I had the game sold out because they had the best team in the league. He said, now, there's only way I can allow this thing to happen. He said, are you willing to pay their airfare and lodgings coming up to play you? And are you willing to pay them their game salary? So I turned to my lawyer, Dick Thigpen, and I said, Dick, goddammit, can we afford it? He said, barely. So there we are. It might be the only time in history that an owner paid for a team to come up and paid their paychecks, and they beat us. And so after the game, the quarterback for the team came over to me and said, Upton, thanks so much. Sorry to beat you. And by the way, he puts it in my face. He said, thanks for the paycheck. It's the only time I had more firsts. It was the only time in history where we paid the team way up to play and they beat us. And I had to hand out the paychecks after the game. People wouldn't believe it. There's a movie here, guys. Anyway,
Well,
The
that maybe
WFL and the ABA are the two leagues that people talk about, that the crazy shenanigans that went on, and the innovations, the 3-point line of the ABA, the red, white, and blue basketballs, all the fun stuff. That they started the slam dunk contest at the All-Star game. So
yep.
there's lots of crazy things that have happened in that league and this league, I'm sure. I wanted you to know, by the way, that we've been talking to some of your former players the last couple of weeks. Ray Parson, Robbie Reynolds, Craig
Great guy.
Capitan, Daryl Bungie. We're trying to get a few more in. They all spoke very highly of their time playing for you and playing in Charlotte. You could tell, and I think Tim would agree with me on this, you could tell what it meant to those players to get to play football in a professional setting in Charlotte. And Robbie, in particular, being from that neck of the woods, really enjoyed it. So he may have been the only player excited to come from New York to Charlotte when the move was announced.
Well, another one that I know you haven't got in touch with, Donald Highsmith, who played with the Raiders, was a terrific player. But I will tell you this. What I learned as a young man growing up, living in the same house with 33 football players when my father owned the Eagles, was, you really can't bullshit players. You've got to be honest with them. And that even goes today with as big as the NFL and the game is. And one of the things that I did with our players is I said, this is what you're going to make. You're not going to make much more than that. I can't promise you this or that, but I will tell you this. I will always be honest with you. And I was with them, and I liked them a lot. And so we were kind of all in it together. And I will say, when the league went down dramatically, and I'll get to that in a second, there was a meeting afterwards, and I came to address the players at the final meeting, and it was kind of a little bit of a party. And I said to the players, and I meant it, some of the players were in tears. I said, you know what? We've lost everything. I've lost everything. It's the greatest night of my life because I went through this with you guys. I never bullshitted you. I told you the way it was, and I couldn't have been prouder. There were tears in that room. There were guys that would said, you know what? There are guys that got up in that room and said, if I made nothing, I would still play. That's how much it was. When you see pro football today and you see not only the big contracts, everybody's got an agent. I don't have to go to the media anymore. I can go to the guy's Twitter account and hear some phony crap that he's throwing to me. This was the last time that there was a genuine feel for the game and the players. You'll never get that again. I never would get it again. And so whatever was really bad about the league, not with me, not with those players, not with the town of Charlotte. Loved every minute of it, as bad as it was. But I have 2 or 3 stories to tell you here about how things kind of really went crazy in the second year. One day I'm sitting in the office and I get a call from a guy that said he was with the FBI, and he said, we're investigating. Did George Sauer, was he hiding Patty Hearst? I'm going on, you gotta be kidding me. Now Sauer was this brilliant. If he had stayed he didn't want anything more to do with the AFL or professional football, and wrote books and poetry. He basically would have gone to the Hall of Fame with a great Jet team, Maynard and Sauer and Namath. But he decided he wanted to play in a different league and write his books. And he knew that, I'm sure, the underground and whatever it was. And I said, I don't know whether George Sauer is hiding Patty Hearst. I mean, it was the biggest thing in the country. I said, I said, but I wouldn't be surprised. But that's the way it was. Anything could happen at any time with what went on there for 2 years.
Need insurance? Go to a team that's got your back. The Lawson Insurance Group, run by the Lawson brothers, right here in Raleigh. They deliver real service, smart protection, and the kind of trust that's hard to find these days. Find them online by searching Lawson Insurance Group. That's LAWSON, Lawson Insurance Group. And tell them DG sent you. Looking for the best food in Wrightsville Beach? Check out King Neptune Restaurant, owned by our friends Jimmy and Keaton Galeese. With fresh seafood, tasty steaks, creative cocktails, and the perfect beachside vibe, it's gotta be on your must-visit list. Whether you're grabbing a weekend lunch or brunch, enjoying dinner and drinks, or catching up with friends at the bar, King Neptune is the place to be. That's King Neptune Restaurant in Wrightsville Beach.
Something that Todd and I have both been through in our writing careers. There were so many people that I've written about and talked to and interviewed and just been a part of who truly had an appreciation, even though they got practically nothing for participating in professional sports or college sports or just even the opportunity to play. Um, I'm not here to create any kind of distance between what old time players how they felt and what modern players felt, but genuinely appreciate the fact that so many people enjoyed playing and did it for the love of the game and the love of the sport, and that's what you did in creating the teams as well. So thank you for that.
Well, I thank Charlotte, and again, you could, like Baltimore, you could walk down the street in Charlotte and people would be yelling at you, "Hey, Upton, what are we going to do tonight?" Or, "Jesus, that was a lousy this or that." There was a homeliness about Charlotte. You felt like even though I was the boy that came from the north, uh, I never felt that way. From the very first day I was there, that was, they want to know what's going on, and I was the type of owner, and I'm still that type of person, that you stop me on the street and you ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer, and that's, I think I really appreciated about them too. And again, remember that after the first year disaster, and then trying to reorganize again, I don't think there's been any city where a team that had really basically nothing, this guy Paul Sassone said that he was going to be able to finance the team, and then in the end we found out he was an ex-mafioso guy and flew around in planes with Bill Bellinger with pistols with his buddies. I mean, it was all really crazy. And when that story finally came out and hit the headlines, that this guy was really crazy. And by the way, they found him eventually years later in the trunk of a car. Not sure whether he committed suicide or what. But when the North Carolina National Bank, and you tell me any city in this country that would do this today, when Luther Hodges and Hugh McCall heard the story and heard that we were not going to have enough money to be able to participate the second year in the World Football League because you had to have a certain amount of money to get in, the North Carolina National Bank actually put up the money for us to get back in the league again. You're not going to see that again. And that gesture on behalf of the city really went a long way in what eventually became the city finally getting a franchise.
And
Let's
for
talk
those of
about
you here listening on This Was Then with me, Tim Peeler, and my friend Todd McGee, North Carolina National Bank, it was a great regional bank that I grew up with around here. You know it now as Bank of America. It's on the side
Correct.
of the football stadium in downtown Charlotte. NCNB became the largest bank in the country and became Bank of America
Correct.
from those roots in Charlotte and from the business dealings and the business that those guys that you just talked about, Luther Hodges and Hugh McCall, making business decisions that were good for the city.
And that how many places do you really see that? I mean, I'm just finished. I'm in a book being written about how the Colts were really run out of Baltimore, even though Bob Irsay bought it and took it to Indianapolis, and how the city fathers in the end didn't cooperate and made life so miserable for them. It was just the opposite with Charlotte. I mean, everybody knew we had no money, and we were trying to raise it. In fact, another funny story is I got a call. People were desperate because they wanted to save the Hornets, and so I got a call from an officer at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He said, "Mr. Bell," he said, "if you come down here," he said, "I think we're going to be able to raise enough money for you to make it into the second year." So I thought, when you're desperate, you do anything. So one of the owners of the team gave me his private plane. I flew to Fort Bragg, walked in, and I heard the screaming and yelling and thousands of people. And I thought, oh my God, they're here. Even if they each, take $100 or whatever it is, we're put over the top. So I said, I'm ready to go in. It was officer. Sir, I'm ready to go in. And he said, oh, no, that's not the place. He said, this is the other place in the other hall. I walked in the other hall. There was nobody there. There was absolutely nobody there. I mean, and one of the Charlotte papers covered it. And the officer said, I'm really sorry. I thought we would get a huge crowd because people love the Hornets. So when that story again hit the paper and I came back, I said, there were so many ups and downs, and the players were up and down with us on this whole thing because it was a big family. But you could, as I said repeatedly, you could write a book just on those 2 years in Charlotte, and it would be a bestseller because the characters. Another story: the local TV station WRET was owned by Ted Turner.
Ted Turner.
So a guy by the name of Thrash, Jim Thrash, I don't know whether he's still alive or not, called me and he said, Ted's coming into town, and he said he wants to sit down and meet with you and tell you how he wants to put your games on TV, and he's going to put your games on all throughout the South. And I thought, oh, this is just bullshit. But anyway, Turner comes in. We go into the NCNB. We meet with the lawyer, myself, and Dick Thigpen. He comes in dressed to the nines, no socks, feet up on the table, and it was the most brilliant conversation that I ever had with a genius. You might have a conversation with Einstein. This guy was amazing, and so he said to me and I put this in my book. He said to me in our conversation, he said, I'm about to take a chance. He said, on this new network, he said, it ain't sports. He said, I said, well, what's the network going to be? And he said, it's going to be called the Cable News Network. He said, I'm not sure it's got even a chance. And I said, so I stupidly said to him, you know what? You're probably right. But what a great deal. And so there's history talking to this guy about everything. And of course, he was involved in the America's Cup, and he was racing up in Newport. And he said, come up and see me in Newport. But the other thing he said to me when there was an NFL strike that summer, NBC came to me and said, we're thinking about putting your team on television. He said, if the strike continues. And Turner called me and he said, I'll put every one of your goddamn games on all throughout the South. And he would have done it. So
I grew up watching every Atlanta Braves game on WRET in Charlotte because it was one of his three flagship stations at the time. It all came from WTBS, but he had 3 or 4 of those stations across the South, and Charlotte was one of them.
He would have done it. He unlike a lot of other people, if he told you he was going to do it, you didn't need anything in writing with that guy. You knew what you were getting. So, again, another great character. And I'll tell you another person, you're talking about North Carolina history, who came up and wanted to be involved was Charlie Choo Choo Justice, one of the immortals of North Carolina. Now, I actually, as a boy, saw him play in college. So I know all your people.
Choo Choo was my dad's insurance agent when he was living
Was he
in
really? Oh,
Cherryville, North Carolina. Yep.
Yeah.
But he was a great name. He was bigger than big. He was bigger than Arnold Palmer at one point in
if you could get
North
him
Carolina's
to a
history.
game, if you could get him to a game, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring all of the North Carolina people. You know what? I met David Thompson when they had, when they were the NCAA champs and all the things that they did, because I played basketball in high school and then in college. You know who my partner was in high school? The future head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, Paul Westhead. He and I played in high school together and went on to play in college. So whatever it is, we got it.
Well, we've talked about a whole lot of things. I don't know how many more stories. I bet we could talk all night and hear stories, but we really appreciate you sharing what you've done tonight in this episode of This Was Then, talking about the 1974 and 1975 World Football League Charlotte Hornets. I have two questions left for you. The first is, whose idea was it to call the football team the Hornets, which goes back to Revolutionary War days in the city and in North Carolina? Who convinced you to do that?
Me. I didn't need anybody else to tell me. Me. And in fact, I'll tell you this story. When the league went down, the guy George, whatever his name is, George Shin, who had the Charlotte basketball team.
Yes.
I was going to sue that son of a bitch for stealing my name and not paying me for the name. Pardon my language, but that kind of was insulting because I knew that name. I knew what I wanted for it. I knew the past of the name, and I wanted to honor that name. And that's why we called them the Charlotte Hornets.
The last thing I'll say is that if anybody from Raleigh, from Greensboro, from any part of the state goes to Charlotte and makes the critical, fateful error of saying they're in downtown Charlotte, they will always be corrected and said, this is not downtown, this is uptown. And I now like to think that this is due to my new good friend, Upton Bell. So thank you for being with us here tonight.
We're uptown. Anyway, thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Do it again.
I wanted to ask you one more question. Because I know in 75 you have said you wanted to continue with the league. Do you think if y'all had been able to finish that season and get to the playoffs and come back in 76, the league, what would have the chances have been that it would have been ultimately successful?
I think it would have ultimately been successful because what happened was Chris Hemmeter came in, and really a brilliant guy, numbers guy. And what he did was he limited teams. You couldn't go out and just sign every big name. You had to limit it to what your box office was. In other words, if you had 20 or 30,000 people at the game, each player would get 1 or 2%, depending upon what position they played. I think there had been 4 or 5 teams left in that, whether it went to the NFL or not. And again, as I said, I went to Dan Rooney and I said, I've thoroughly tested this place, and this place should be a National Football League franchise. One other story I will tell you, that John Bassett, who owned the Memphis team, who had signed Zonka Kickamore, and we're going down there to play them. It's a big game in the second year. So Bassett said to me he had persuaded Elvis Presley to own a piece of the team. And I said to Bassett, Jesus, any cheap trick to get somebody in here. So he said to me, do you want to meet the king? And I said, sure. So he took me up off the press box into a private room where Presley was surrounded by more people than Trump has around him today. and I'll never forget it. I said, how you doing, King? And he barely mumbled. He was sweating profusely, and he really looked terrible. And of course, we saw what happened 2 years later. He was gone. But I said to Bassett, well, we lost the game to Zonka Kick and Warfield, but at least I met the king. So what the hell? We're even now. So basically, there were so many stories out of that anyway.
So you met the head of the Arnie's Army. You met the king. I'm assuming at some point you met the king of NASCAR and the king of North Carolina as well, Richard Petty.
Did I meet them all, boy? I'll tell you why. Again, when you went to Charlotte, I was the Grand Marshal of the Charlotte 500. and not only that, I was the Grand Marshal the Thanksgiving Day parade. It's almost like they thought, Jesus, Santa's come down to see it, something. But I mean, they got me. The guy who ran the track was a good friend of John Belk's.
Humpy Wheeler.
Yes, he did, but there was also another guy. So I was the grand marshal, and I remember saying to him, Jesus Christ, I said, all those cars behind us, one wrong move and I'm dead, because it's a bank. People don't realize how banked those tracks are. And there's like 500,000 people there. And I said, I don't want to die in front of 500,000 people. I mean, it was quite an honor to be that, and also in your Thanksgiving Day parade. I mean, there's so many stories and memories of Charlotte. I mean, we could go on forever, which I'm sure you don't. So.
Oh, I could listen to this all night long, and would love to hear even more stories, and maybe we'll get together again sometime soon.
I hope so, gentlemen. Thank you. And by the way, are we finished now?
I don't think I have anything else to add. I think well, I did want to tell you that when I was a kid, I was a Colts fan. So I remember watching the team win the Super Bowl against the Cowboys on Jim O'Brien. I think it's Jim O'Brien. Was that the kicker?
I drafted him.
Made the winning. I didn't realize he played wide receiver for you too.
Yeah. Well, you know what the coach said to me? Tell that guy to cut his goddamn hair. He said, I don't like guys with long hair. I said, listen, O'Brien's the perfect kicker. He's whacked out. He's got long hair. He's one of those hippies in the future. And I said, when he's under pressure, he'll make the kick, which he did to win the game for us. One thing I did want to say to you, when you're finished, I'd love to get a copy of it, of the show. I'm going to put it in. I have, if you could publicize it, I have one of the largest collections in America, the Upton Bell of sports collection at UMass Amherst, which includes the whole history of football artifacts, trophies. In fact, in the major case there is a Charlotte Hornets football signed by every one of the players of the Hornets. So what I want to do is take all the major interviews I take, and I put it in the Upton Bell collection. So if you would publicize it when you can, I love it. It's a whole history of America from the 1890s, including, you ready for this, gentlemen? A letter between Abraham Lincoln and my great-grandfather.
That's amazing. And we will definitely put a link into your book and to some of the other things that you have done. As I said at the very beginning, you're one of the most fascinating people I've ever talked to. Up there with some of the big names in basketball that have been in North Carolina, but Leroy Walker, who was the head of the U.S. Olympic Committee, who was from Durham, just amazing people who did amazing things, and I certainly count you among those.